can join in. Um, so we were invited by Miss Silva to give you guys a presentation on the coral reef ecosystem and some of the research and monitoring work that we do at Belize Audubon Society. My name is Tanya Barona, and I am the Biodiversity Research and Monitoring Officer for the marine section, because we also have a terrestrial research and monitoring officer. Let me see if I can get the camera to work. Okay, great. So I will share my presentation then. All right, so what we want to start with today is an introduction to coral reefs, and I'll do a bit of presentation and some videos, so it will not be a long, boring presentation. So basically, when you're looking at coral reefs, we think about beautiful fishes, crystal clear waters, and distant areas not near the coastline. So there are three main types of reef in the world. This includes barrier reefs, atolls, and fringing reefs. Belize has the second largest barrier reef, or the first largest barrier reef in the Western Hemisphere, and it is distinct in that it creates a barrier along the coastline, hence the name barrier reef. The other type of reef that you find in this area are atolls. An atoll is a ring-shaped coral reef consisting of a coral rim that encircles a lagoon, meaning on the outer perimeter of an atoll, you have depths plunging to 500 meters or 500 feet and beyond, while the inside is very shallow, reaching only a max depth of around 30 to 40 feet. You also find fringing reefs, which is, as the name indicates, it's a reef that forms on the fringes of islands. All right, so reef zones. Like a miniature mountain system, coral reefs are made up of peaks and valleys. Reefs are not uniform, but are formed by the wave action of the sea and structure of the sea floor. The three primary reef zones are the lagoon, where you find your beaches, your mangroves, your seagrass beds, and your patch reefs. And there is a reef crest, and of course the forereef. So if you can see my pointer, I will indicate to you where the lagoon is, which is the island, which is the area from the mainland to the reef crest, which is this brown area here where the coral peaks. In some areas, you can see the structure outside of the water. In other areas, it's just below the surface of the water. And beyond that, you get deeper depths, which either occurs in a slope going from shallow to deep, or there is a distinct drop off. And that is what we call the floor reef. All right, in looking at the map of Belize, or a portion of the map of Belize, you can see an example of the barrier reef and 3 of the atolls found in this area, in the Mesoamerican Reef area. There is a 4th atoll called the Banco Chinchorro Atoll, and that is located in Mexican waters. All right, so there are 2 types of corals, and there are many different species. First, there is the soft corals, and as the name indicates, they are soft, and there are the hard corals, which are by description hard or stony. Stony corals are the major framework or constructors of coral reefs. They have soft-bodied polyps within a calcareous skeleton. The polyps expand to feed on plankton, usually during the night. However, they do get nutrition from an algae which lives in symbiosis with them. Corals grow in colonies, and this is how they form an entire reef system. And they do this by reproducing asexually, such as the finger coral, meaning if a portion of a finger coral breaks off, it will continue to grow. Or they reproduce sexually, where they release gametes into the water once or several times for the year. Coral species that reproduce sexually include the brain corals and the larger boulder corals. Spawning usually occurs during August, so this is when the organizations that do reproduction monitoring would get out and conduct their surveys. For a coral to grow, the coral larvae needs to settle on solid surfaces like dead coral or crustous coralline algae, which is basically a hard algae. It resembles cement. From there, it starts to grow and develop. It anchors onto the reef. Polyps start to generate, and this is what we call a recruit. This gives the reef a chance of recovering after the disasters like hurricanes or mass disease events or bleaching that they're not able to recover from. They can grow in different shapes and forms. We have fast-growing branching corals, and then we have the slower-growing massive corals. And I'll show you a video that, it's a simple video, but it's going to demonstrate how corals grow. As I mentioned earlier, corals live in a symbiotic relationship with an algae called the zooxanthellae, and they're very tiny, yellow-brown, and they exist within the polyps. They provide access to the coral itself. The structure provides shelter for the zooxanthellae, and it gives the zooxanthellae access to carbon dioxide, which in turn it uses to photosynthesize and create inorganic waste, which is essentially nutrients for the host coral to consume. Bleaching occurs when conditions are not favorable for the zooxanthellae or the algae anymore, so the algae is expelled And this, given that the algae is what gives the coral the color, it then becomes white, which mimics bleaching, hence the name bleaching. And conditions can become unfavorable for a number of reasons. The most common one is from temperature changes in the water, but it could also be other impacts, for example, pollution or too much nutrients in the water or other factors. Severity of bleaching varies. Therefore, you may only see paling of the color, or you can see it becoming fully bleached, or only a portion of the coral becoming bleached. It depends on how much of that coral is subject to the disturbance. Corals can become affected by pathogens, which causes diseases. There are a variety of diseases which a coral can undergo, and this extends to both the stony corals and the soft corals. So corals do not exist in isolation. Before I go on from here, let me show you the video that I wanted to present. Could someone let me know if you can hear the audio?
No, miss.
Did you hear anything just now?
No, miss. No, miss.
Okay, let me skip the video and I'll see if I can show it at the end. There is something with my audio on the computer, but I will show it after this. All right, so to continue from where I left off, corals don't exist in isolation. Growing on the coral reef, well, of course, the corals are other animals such as sponges, worms, crabs, mollusks, different types of fish, sea turtles, and marine mammals also share the area and live around coral reefs. So to look at some of these organisms that coexist or live within the ecosystem, you have the carnivores, herbivores, algae, and corallivores. So these are things that can predate on corals or benefit from being around them or benefit from what can be found within corals. For example, the damselfish. This is a herbivore and it feeds on algae that grows on, for example, a dead coral. When a coral dies, it is consumed by algae and it goes through different stages. One of the first stage where the algae begins to grow, you have damselfish surrounding that coral and they pick on the algae and scrape at it, which is why you're seeing these white patches. These are just bite marks. So the damselfish would create a garden and use it as a nursery for their young. So you can see in this type of ecosystem, different species benefit from each other. When large predators are rare, corallivores may be very common and may kill the coral. So if we go back a few slides, corallivores are some examples are small mollusks, for example, fireworms or snails that would, just like the damselfish, These ones actually feed on the coral itself, whereas the damselfish would just pick off the algae. The damselfish does grasp at some of the coral as well, so it does have a negative impact, but not as severe as the corallivores, which are literally coral eaters. So when you have a lack of larger predators that feed on the corallivores, then you have a surplus of the corallivores, and the impact to the reef is then magnified. Corals also compete for space with other corals. For example, let me see if we have one here. For example, if you have a brain coral at the bottom here and a different species of coral, these are, remember, they're separate coral colonies. Therefore, they will just grow. They're not able to move, but they will grow in that same space. So when both of them get bigger, the space becomes less, and one would then outcompete the other coral. Meaning, if they were to touch, one will eventually die, or a portion of it will eventually die, giving space for the more dominant coral to thrive. You also have competition for space with algae. For example, the main photo in the background, you can see there is a lot of algae around this one branching brain coral. Smaller coral recruits, remember when a larvae lands, it anchors to a base. If there is a lot of algae around, it creates a small canopy system that shields sunlight from reaching the recruits. Therefore, the coral or the recruits are not able to grow into much larger coral. There is also competition with aggressive invertebrates. This includes sponges, some of the soft corals, and tunicates. There's also cyanobacteria that grows on the reef, and different types of algae that again smothers or traps sediment, which hinders growth. Another organism, or two organisms that keep the reef ecosystem in balance, is the diadema, or the long spine sea urchin, and the various species of parrotfish. Basically, just like the damselfish, these are herbivores and they feed on the algae. By having their numbers high, they keep this algae growth in check. Therefore, you don't have some of the negative impacts that I just listed. When herbivores are rare, this is more or less what you get your reef looking like. You do have some live coral, but there are very few and spaced far apart. And generally brown, you don't have that vibrant, bright color anymore. These are just examples of the different type of algae that may consume a reef. Earlier I mentioned that there is a coralline algae that is ideal for coral recruits to settle, or coral larvae to settle, and it's this purple one in the top left corner that resembles cement paste. It's hard, it's solid, it's calcareous, meaning it has a lot of limestone, and it's ideal. So there are some algae that are fast growing and do have a lot of negative impacts, but just like with everything else, there is good and there is bad. So there is a good algae mix in between that. All right, so earlier I mentioned that there are different types of coral. You have the soft, the hard, but in the hard coral, they're broken down into massive, which are big boulders, branching, flowers, or blade or plated corals. We do have these nodular corals, but we only have 3 species in the area, so it's a small category. When identifying corals, you look at the shape. To a novice, it would just seem like our coral pretty much look the same. If, for example, all of these boulders, if you don't look for something specific, they could resemble each other. Just like the branching, you have this, which is called the elk horn. There is a staghorn, which looks pretty similar as well in terms of coloration, and it also branches, but there are key things to look for when identifying a coral, and that includes the colony shape, um, the colony surface, if it's bumpy or smooth, the polyp size, if it's big or small, polyp shape, polyp color, and septal shape. But this is very detailed. For basic coral identification, it's not necessary to look at that. All right. Let me check with Mr. Rivera to see if he has gotten his audio to work. And then I will work on my video as well so that I can show you before I move on to the next portion of the presentation. Guys, while I sort this out, would it be possible for you to assist me with filling out a survey? One of the things that we're doing right now is trying to combat stony coral tissue loss disease at Lighthouse Reef Atoll. And it's only going to take a few minutes, but it does lead up to what I'm going to present on coral reefs next. So if you can quickly fill that out while I sort out all these glitches, that would be great. I will just put the link in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. Guys, so can you please access the link that's going to be given so that the survey could be answered? We would greatly appreciate your contribution. Thank you so much, Ms. Tanya.
You're welcome. All right, I've copied the link to the chat box. If there are any errors in the survey itself, just skip over it. There is a section that talks about tour operators, which is only 3 questions. You can just skip over that, or I believe it gives you an option to select none. But other than that, it should be fine.
Excuse me, Ms. Tanya, for the survey, it says you need a Microsoft account and it needs to be a work or school account. It can't be a personal email account.
Oh,
That is for the survey.
Okay, let me sort that out real quick. I think I selected the wrong link. Just give me one
Okay.
second.
Because most of us have mainly Google accounts.
Right, I selected the wrong option. Sorry about that. I will
Okay.
resend the link right now.
Yes, now yes, it's accessible. Yes, thank you, Owen. Okay, guys, so for this questionnaire, a lot of it is based on when we would go to trips. So mainly it's gonna be like for school trips or tourism. And it's like basically I'm guessing all year round since we have depends on the scheduling. And it's just for like a few days that we usually would stay. You guys have any questions on the survey so far? Like, for example, on the areas that we usually work with, it would be the Blue Hole National Monument and the Half Moon Key National Monument as well. And for the areas, we usually go about with the all of the options for the habitat types. Yeah, I think it's all of them except the deep slopes. That's 300 feet and over. Those we don't really go around with. But everything else, yes. Yeah, Shanti?
Miss, which tour operator do you work mostly when you go to the lighthouses?
In that case, we use none because we just work along with Audubon and it's not there as an option. Or other times we work with Blue Vengers, but as well it's not there. And they're not like a tour, they're an organization. So it's none. And then what activities we go about: snorkeling, diving. Yep, snorkeling and diving. For the popular sites that we usually go is the Blue Hole, the Blue Hole Coral Fringe. Yeah, those two. And the changes would be like before we used to see more species of different fishes, a larger amount, and now it has reduced. Even the corals, it's not as rich as it used to be. So in which case you have fewer large and small coral heads, you have less production available, less branching corals and so forth. Anyone else had a question?
Just a note on question 31. There seems to be no options. It's just option 1 and 2. You can go ahead and select option 1 because an answer is required, but I will just skip over that when I do the processing.
Okay. Oh, it's for question 31. Okay, so just click on option 1. All right. Guys, for the corals, yes, as mentioned, they could get a disease and then they start becoming pale. That's where the coral bleaching comes about. And they do start to get weak and break off. The color becomes into a pale color.
If I could add, Ms. Silva,
Yes.
the survey is to gauge everybody's knowledge so
Okay.
that we could develop outreach material. So it's not a quiz, it's just for them to be honest with what they know so that we know how to tailor our program to get the information out there.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Hello, Miss Silva.
Hi, there's an echoing.
Okay, 1 second.
I think you're connected in two devices. If anything, you're gonna have to mute one of them completely. Are you on both on two accounts?
All right, just checking up on you guys. Are you close to completing the survey?
I'm done, Miss.
Same here.
Me too.
Okay, then I think it's fair for us to proceed with the presentations. I'll try showing this video again. I logged on to a different computer, so we'll put the audio for you. Still not able So I guess I'm not going to get that audio to work. What I'll do is upload it to Google Drive and then just share the link so you can watch it afterwards.
Excuse me, you could maybe try at the bottom where it says to share your screen. If you could click on a tab where it says best for video and animation. You see where the icon for the hand is?
Right.
Next to it, yeah, there is one that says a tab.
Yeah.
Okay, click that one that says best for video and animation, and then you could find maybe your PowerPoint if you have it open, or is it on a Chrome page or something?
It's in the PowerPoint.
It's a PowerPoint.
So it plays, but it doesn't.
Yeah, you can't hear it. Okay. Yeah.
It's not even giving me the option in a tab.
Yeah, for a PowerPoint. Oh, it's not. Okay, well, I guess I'll just share it with them when you share it with me, I guess, so that it's not.
Okay. All right, I can do that. I have other videos, but they don't require the audio. So those, it's just to watch.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. Let me share my screen again. All right. So one of the topics Ms. Silva asked me to cover was the research and monitoring that we do at Lighthouse Reef Atoll, specifically relating to the coral reef ecosystem. So to get into that, this is the exciting part. To get into that, first let's look at ecosystems. We know that they are a community of living organisms in conjunction with the non-living component of the environment, and they function as one unique system. When we talk about marine biodiversity, we're talking about the number of species or species type within a particular ecosystem. So, how do we gather information on marine biodiversity and the ecosystem itself? We have to do ecological sampling, which is basically selecting a sample from your entire ecosystem, which is a portion or a piece or a segment that is representative of the whole ecosystem. Why do we do this? Because it's impossible to measure the whole system. There is one big assumption with sampling. Given that we're not able to fully measure the entire ecosystem, we have to do a best guess of what is representative of that ecosystem. Therefore, it is a big assumption. We're only going by what we are observing, by what we think is representative, and therefore that can have an impact on the results that we get. So we have to be very organized and take all precautions necessary when selecting our samples. Key ways to do that is to take enough samples so that you get a holistic picture of your ecosystem, and to avoid bias when collecting your data from your samples. So how do you eliminate bias? You need to have a reliable team. This is just the team at the 50Audubun Society, the marine team, which consists of the biologists and assistant data collector and field assistants. So in looking at the data collection methods that are commonly used in the marine environment and specifically where we do our work, we use 3 types: the transect method, which includes both the line and belt transect. There is the quadrat method and the plot method. So what is a line transect? It is a measured line laid across an area in the direction of the environmental gradient. All species touching the line are to be recorded along the entire length of the transect, and you may do multiple transects at each site. Things you can gather from using the line transect method is measuring the presence or absence of a species. For example, this is a line transect of one of the coral surveys that we did recently. So essentially what is occurring here is that a transect is being laid out. It could be a measuring tape, it could be a marked line, but you'll notice we lay them parallel to each other to be able to collect our data. You can determine based on your study the length of your transect, how many points you want to have along that transect. You just need to be consistent from one monitoring activity to the next to be able to compare your data over time. What do we do next? We record our data after we have laid the transect. If you'll notice on the transect line, there are specific marks. These are spaced 10 centimeters apart for this one. However, that's not necessarily standard. It depends on what you're looking for. There are cases where you can record every 25 centimeters or every 50 meters. It's all based on your research. What we're looking for is what falls exactly under the mark. So for example, you can see under this red point, there is sand. Up further, there is algae. It could be a sponge, it could be live coral, and this can give you some indication of percent cover of what's down there. So what percentage of your line is occupied by algae? Or what percentage of your line is occupied by live coral or dead coral or sponges? It's whatever you're looking for. These numbers can indicate whether your ecosystem is thriving or if it is failing. Remember in the earlier presentation I mentioned that if you have an overgrowth of algae, it can smother young growing corals. So this is supportive or concrete evidence to show what you're observing. Again, the number of transects depend on your study. Ideally, you'd want to do a minimum of 5 or 6. On your line transects, what you can record also is measurement of corals. You generally have some piece of equipment or tool that is that has increments that allows you to measure what you're looking at. The reasons why you would want to measure corals along your transect is, again, to determine, is this an area where we find generally recruits? Is it an area where we have mainly branching corals? Do we have more older, bolder corals? Again, it provides insight to what is happening in the area. Certain species are habitat, for example, lobsters. So this also is a good indicator, or it can help you map out or predict where you would find certain species. Depth is also a factor. This is a different site demonstrating the same method. However, this site has larger, bolder corals versus the other site, which has smaller corals. If you'll notice, there is a difference in this area too. There is a lot of sand. While measuring your corals too, you can also look for any sign of diseases, any sign of bleaching or anything abnormal occurring with your coral. Ideally, you'd want to monitor the same sites every time, whether it's quarterly, annually, or every 2 years. Currently, we're doing every year, but we go back to the same sites. All right, the other method is the belt transect method. This is used to estimate the distribution of organisms in relation to a certain area. It records all the species found between 2 lines and how far they are from a certain place or area, and how many of them are there. This is usually done for animals or moving organisms. Again, to estimate percent cover, or in this case for marine ecosystems, it looks at fish. So similar to the line transect, a diver swims with a line, extends it to the distance they want to cover. For us, it's 30 meters. And if you'll notice in the diagram here, there is a segmented line or border around the tape measure. From the tape measure, it extends 1 meter to the left and 1 meter to the right, creating an imaginary belt for the surveyor to conduct their survey. Similar to the line transect and the coral measurements, a tool is used to help estimate that distance from the center point or the center line to the margins of your belt. So the PVC bar that is used here is a total of 2 meters in length, and this covers your 1 meter on the right and 1 meter on the left. The diver swims along the transect and looks or surveys the area for the different fish species that includes the angelfishes, the parrotfishes, the predators, and the smaller recruit fishes. The other method that we implement or use to collect our data is the quadrat method. A plot is used to isolate a standard unit area of study of a distribution of an item over a large area. This is suitable for sampling plants, slow-moving animals, and some aquatic organisms. Again, this can give you a measure of coverage and abundance if you are able to determine, or if you predetermine the size of your quadrat. And this is an example of a quadrat. So for example, you're looking here at seagrass coverage. By knowing the dimension of your quadrat, you're able to then calculate the percentage of an area that is covered by seagrass. If you have any questions, you can feel free to interrupt and ask them as we're going along. So in assessing this quadrat, you can see that there's only a portion of it covered by seagrass. There is some sand and there is seagrass. So you would estimate, for example, that this is about 40 to 50% coverage. Let me skip forward. In looking at a combined method approach, you have a transect and a quadrat. By knowing the length of your transect, which for example would be 50 meters, and knowing the size of your quadrat, which may be 1 meter by 1 meter, you're able to then average the percent cover for each quadrat. So for example, you might have 50%, 20%, 50%, 30%, until you have a total along your transect. You can then estimate the percent cover of your entire seagrass meadow. Does this make sense? All right, I'll take 5 minutes for everyone understanding. We'll move on to the point center quarter method, or the PCQM. This is more related to mangrove or plant habitat. It is fast, it is easy, and it is plotless. Essentially, what you do again is lay out a transect, and at every meter, or every 5 meters, you record and measure 4 trees at that meter mark. So along your transect, you approach the 5 meter mark. You essentially draw an imaginary box around your 5 meters, your mark, and you then select 4 trees that are nearby. So you would measure each tree at your 5 meter mark. So you will get 4 trees at your 5 meter mark. You move on to 10, you may get 4 trees. You move on to 15, you get another 4 trees until you complete the entire length of your transect. Again, you determine how long you want your transect to be. This provides information. All methods essentially can provide you information on density, coverage, frequency, biomass, and diversity. When looking at density, essentially what you're doing is determining how many individuals you record in a specified area. From that, you can deduce how many individuals you would expect to find in a larger area. For example, if you do a transit that is 30 meters by, or for example, 50 meters by 2 meters, a belt. So you have a 50-meter transit and 1 meter on either side of the belt. You have a predetermined area. You calculate your area just like you would in a math class, length times width squared. You get your area, and then you divide the number of individuals you find by your area, and you're able to get a ratio. So for example, let's say you find 10 brain corals in a 400-meter area, square meter area. You're then able to deduce that you could find X amount of brain corals in a hectare. So it gives you a representation of the larger area and a wider understanding of your entire ecosystem. You're able to determine frequency as well. The number of times you record, for example, a specific species of fish. Biomass, you get this by determining, for example, with fish. If you know the average weight of fish is by being a certain length, when you record your fish on your belt transit, you're also estimating the size of the fish. So based on studies that have been done in the past, you can safely say that a fish of, for example, 10 centimeters has a weight of X. This is known, this is standard, so you can then be able to calculate your biomass of a specific fish species on your reef. For example, commercial species like the snappers and the groupers. You can then determine or make informed decisions on how much of your commercial species you can safely extract without affecting or having a negative impact on your ecosystem. Does this make sense? So it's to implement policies that eventually achieve sustainable extraction. Diversity looks at species richness, which is essentially the number of species in an area, and the abundance, which is the number of individuals in the area. All of this information that we gather, we then put into a summary report, which follows the standard report writing procedure, which includes an abstract, introduction, citation, the method used, your results, the discussion of your results, your conclusion, and any recommendations that you would make. Outputs that we gather from the data that we could collect includes producing a reef report card, which is a summary of the entire Mesoamerican reef system. Essentially what occurs is that the methodology that we use at Lighthouse Reef is then replicated in different areas across the leaves, and also Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala, to be able to produce a report card. What we get is a grade for our reef or our coral ecosystem, which can be very good, fair, poor, or critical. It looks at coral cover, which was the benthic line I just showed to you, the algae cover, which you get from the transit, the benthic line transit, herbivorous fish, and commercial fish species. So in looking at our grade for the last report card that was put out, for the entire Mesoamerican reef system, we're mainly in fair to poor condition, with a total of 40% being poor, Um, Belize has 40%, 47% of our reef being poor. And again, this is from sampling and replicating in multiple samples that we're able to get a wider representation of what's happening on the entire reef. Guatemala is at 50% being poor. Honduras is lower, and Mexico is also lower than Belize. Yes, someone raised their hand. Go ahead.
You had a question, Rachel? Does anyone have a question so far? Remember, guys, engagement. Okay, Rachel. Anyone else? Yes, no, confirm or deny, please.
So far, no, miss.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay.
All right. So to end off this presentation, I just want to share with you some results of data that we collected from last year on corals and data that we collected this year at the same site on corals again. So using our line transit and collecting at every 7 centimeters, we were able to determine last year that live coral cover was at 18%, and in 2021 it dropped to 10%. Christos coralline algae, this is the one that I told you is important for coral recruitment. That was at 12%, and that too dropped to 8%. Other algae remained roughly the same. Invertebrates, aggressive invertebrates, so this would be your competing sponges and tunicates, those remain roughly the same at 4 and 5%. And biofilms and turf algae, now this is the smothering algae. This rose from 21 to 30%. Non-living, that is representing the sand, the bare rock. So that roughly remains the same at 21 and 23%. But things we can do with the data, we can divide it into the different habitat types, which is the 4 reef, which surpasses the reef crest, which is deeper than the back reef. This is immediately behind the reef crest, and then there is the thatch reef. So this is what you will find in the lagoon area enclosed within the atoll. So just to give you a graphic representation of what that is, in looking at specific sites, you can see a comparison, for example, at the aquarium, which is the first bar on the graph, compared to 2021, which again is the first bar on the second graph. You can see orange representing live coral cover has gone down, and yeah, you can just compare across both graphs. Right. So that concludes my presentation on methodologies and what you can do with the data. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Yes, Elvis.
Miss, my question is that which type of coral reef or coral species in danger of becoming depleted or in this year?
There are a bunch of them. I think all of them equally face the same type of threats when you're looking at human impacts, climate change, etc. They're basically slow growing and not very evolved, so they have the same resistance, the same system that they have had for many years, so they're very susceptible and weak. However, there is a new disease, the same one that I asked you about in the questionnaire, which is the stony coral tissue loss disease. This targets specific coral species. So of all those that we find in Belize's water, it targets a handful of them, which are categorized into three groups. The highly susceptible, this includes your brain corals, your pillar corals, um, and your other meandering corals. So this is the highly susceptible. Then there is the lesser susceptible. So over a longer period of time, maybe 6 or 7 months after an area has become infected by the stony coral tissue loss disease, then these would then be consumed. And when you're looking at the highly susceptible, you can have a coral dying within a month or a month and a half, the entire colony dying. It doesn't matter the size of the coral, but when you look at the intermediately susceptible species or the lesser susceptible species, they take within 6 months to a year before they're fully consumed or completely died out. So they're equally all susceptible to the different diseases that exist. However, a handful of them are more susceptible to the stony coral. So I can't pinpoint exactly one that's weaker.
Okay, thank you, Miss.
Yes, Herman?
When it comes to diseases in coral, I don't know where do you guys basically get the studies from? Do you get the studies from the three atolls or just from basically Lighthouse Reef Atoll?
Well, as a part of the Belize Audubon Society, we're part of a network called the Coral Reef Monitoring Network, which includes other NGOs. So as a group, we decide on the methodologies that we'll use to collect our data. So everybody that's a member of the group, it includes fisheries, it includes pretty much everybody that surveys marine protected areas. So we're all using the same method to collect the information so that we could compare across the board. So we could compare Lighthouse or all the atolls to the main barrier reef to get a wider picture of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Now, my next question: knowing the result on the research done already by you guys, in which area do you have most of this disease? For example, the coral bleaching, or maybe the white syndrome, or black band disease, or something like that. In which part of the atoll do you see this disease the most?
It's widespread. Actually, it's widespread. At different depths, you get different species of coral. For example, in the lagoon, you will get just a handful of corals, but in deeper depths, you find more variation or on different side of the atoll. So it depends on which disease you're looking at. For example, with the stony coral tissue loss, it's pretty much on everywhere, but we're seeing more occurrences on the western side of the atoll because there are more of the species that are affected on the western side of the atoll. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so that basically is like western side of each atoll due to the fact that coral reefs are more present in the western side of the atoll, no?
Well, for Lighthouse specifically, I can't say for the other atolls.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Elvis.
Miss, what are the possible penalties for individuals if they are caught using gill net or destroying the coral reefs?
There is a charge on gill nets because gill nets have been completely banned. I believe there was a time when it was allowed to a specific group of people, meaning you could have used it outside a protected area. Once you were caught with it inside the protected area, you were fined, or at the discretion of the rangers, determined if they would give you a break or they would report you. But now there is a full ban on gill net, so you're not able to use it anywhere. We usually get gill nets from the illegal fishers. So the ones that would come across the border, they would leave a gill net if they're I don't know, caught, they would just leave it there and go back to their country, and that creates problems for us. Yes, Shante first.
Miss, what are the factors that are affecting the coral reefs at the moment, Miss?
Negative factors, you mean? I'm assuming it's negative.
Yeah, negative factors, Miss.
So the main one right now is the stony coral tissue loss disease, just because of how it moves. It is the most persistent and most virulent that we're seeing right now. Given the rate at which it consumes a coral, it is the high number one threat to the reefs right now. But there are other impacts such as anthropogenic, whether it's through tourism, improper practices, and then of course there's climate change, which leads to sea level rise, change of temperature in the water, etc.
Okay, Miss, thank you.
Yes, Herman.
What is the ratio between coral reproduction and coral death?
When you're looking at coral reproduction, remember I said it occurs for us in Belize, it occurs at around August. Growth is a few millimeters per year. In the branching corals, it occurs faster. However, it's not fast. It's not super fast. It's only a few millimeters to a few centimeters per year. When you're looking at a brain coral, for example, that's a meter in length, it can die within, like I said, for example, with stony coral, it can die within a month. So that's a much faster loss of a meter of coral than it would take for a meter of coral to grow.
Okay, so as the year goes by in the future, we will see more dead corals than living corals. Is that right?
Yes, we're actually already seeing that. So from the data that we collected last year to now, you saw there was a drop from 18% live coral to 10%. That is a vast amount in a short period of time. If you notice, the smothering algae has also increased as a result of that death. When a coral dies, it is immediately consumed by algae, which is why we're seeing a high rise in algae. So you have a situation where you have more smothering algae, therefore it's harder for the recruits to grow. So yes, we anticipate that you would see more mortality as the years come, unless we're able to determine or come up with a solution to combat stony coral tissue loss disease. But what we're finding right now is that nobody since 2013 has been able to pinpoint what causes stony coral tissue loss disease. So it's hard to treat.
Okay, so eventually if no one finds a solution in order to cure this disease, maybe in the next 50 to 70 years, there will be like a drastic depletion of corals, right?
Yes, the species that are susceptible. You still have the other species that won't get it, but those are still being impacted by the other diseases and climate change. So yeah, numbers should go down. It takes human intervention to make a difference.
Okay, thank you very much, Mom.
You're welcome. Before I get to someone else, somebody wrote in the chat if corals can be collected. No, it is not recommended to extract corals. I am not sure what the penalty is. I don't know that we have cases where people do that. It's not practiced as far as I'm aware. Right. Can we, Aisha, you have a question?
Miss, when it comes to like the corals itself, how large do they actually get, or do they come in bunches?
It depends on the species. For example, you have a brain coral, a giant brain coral that will grow to 2, almost 3 meters. You have mountainous stars, those grow to a few meters as well. But then you have a golf ball coral, which doesn't grow up bigger than a golf ball. Some of them form clumps. For example, the finger coral or the branching type, where you can't define the margin between one coral and the next, so it just looks like an entire garden.
Okay, Miss.
Jancy?
Hi, Miss. Good afternoon. So, Miss, my question is, has the production rate of corals increased with the let's say like COVID-19 when like when COVID-19 was not on, lots of fisheries and people would be out in the sea and they would be like neglecting the law, and by they doing that, the production of like corals, or it will affect, because they will be out in the sea. So my question is, has the production of has the corals has increased with this COVID-19?
Thus far, we haven't been able to see a change. It hasn't been enough time since the onset of COVID to be able to determine, just because they're so slow growing. We have seen a slight difference in other species, though, for example, that you would find in ecosystems nearby, such as the seagrass and the sandy areas. Conch numbers have been impacted as a result of not having fishers out there. So they have gone up slightly. In other areas, I'm sure people are doing comparisons with lobsters as well. But in terms of the reef itself, it's too short a time.
Interesting, Miss. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Kylie?
Miss, I have a question. Based on the data collection, so there is specific like equipment to be used when data collecting?
It's basic equipment. Some of it we fabricate with PVC and other material that doesn't erode in the salt water. But generally, it's a tape measure and some form of measuring tool, whether it's a ruler or pipe that we mark out. It's just basic equipment and a slate, something hard for you to attach your underwater paper, and a camera. A camera is always important to document what you're seeing.
Okay, Miss, thank you.
You're welcome. The question in the chat, would I say if there are more corals in the patch reef or the back reef? In the patch reef, I think you'll find more coral. From one atoll to the next, I have seen a difference. For example, at Lighthouse Reef, the patch reefs come all the way to the surface of the water, so you would only find coral along the fringes of a patch. However, at Glover's Reef or Turnef, patches are deeper in water, so you have coral on top as well, so you have more live coral cover in different areas. I guess it's just the formation of the different atolls. But in terms of back reef to patch, I would definitely say you see more in the patch. Just because in the back reef it's very shallow, so you only get certain species. Sometimes certain areas can become exposed to air, like when the tide drops, so that affects what can thrive in that area. All right, if there are no more questions, Mr. Rivera does have a presentation on interconnectivity that he wants to share. So I guess you can take over.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it's good to hear everybody interested in the health of our barrier reef. It seems we have some future scientists here in this classroom, right? Okay, well, hold on a second. I'm using my phone, so just bear with me, please. Let me turn it on. There you go. So my name is Roberto Rivero, and I am the Environmental Education Officer here at the Audubon Society. And unlike the fun life of a marine biologist who enjoys the scenic waters of our beautiful country, I get to develop environmental programs in creating awareness as it relates to protected areas and environmental issues, and also promoting conservation and sustainability. All right. So I have a short presentation here on the interconnectivity of the marine coastal ecosystems and why they're important ecologically, and the ecosystem services they provide. So I'll get to my presentation in a sec. I'll turn off this camera. Okay, can you see that?
No, sir.
Nothing as yet.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I'm back.
Sorry guys, just give us a second. Roberto is transitioning to my computer, so he just needs to bring his USB and then he'll share it from here. Just give us 2 minutes, please.
It can't share? Miss Tanya?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm using Tanya's computer, so I shouldn't have any problem. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right, I got it. Okay, so like I mentioned, I'll be talking about the interconnectivity of the coastal ecosystems, three of them. That is mangrove ecosystem, seagrass, and the corals, like Tanya just talked about. All right. So first of all, let's do a basic review. Right? What is an ecosystem? Well, it's a community of living organisms and their interaction with the physical environment, and we'll get a little into that. All right. And communities have a characteristic species structure that can be measured by species richness, which is a simple listing of the total number of species given in found in a given community, and species diversity. It combines both the numbers of species and the distribution of individuals among the species. That's the evenness. All right. In this case, we're referring to the healthy community and distribution of species between mangrove forests, like I mentioned, seagrass beds, and coral reefs. The three of them form highly complex ecosystems, and the connectivity between them has been shown to increase fish biomass and productivity within each of the ecosystem. Now, how is this balance maintained? Right. So species richness means a healthy population. How? By providing a nurture during developmental stages. For example, mangroves and seagrass act as a home, and we'll get into that. And diversity, it's maintained through a balanced community. Okay. Well, so we'll look at a little about mangroves. I believe you touched on this already in your class. If not, I'll just go. I won't go in depth. I'll just talk a little about its productivity as an ecosystem. So you ever wondered how and why mangroves support such diversity? Well, it's because, like I mentioned, it has a high productivity rate. Okay, and most of the mangrove system is a detritus-based system, means that the litter that falls from the mangrove trees, the leaves, the branches, and other organic matter gets decomposed and contribute to the primary production of nutrients from that system. So when these leaves fall, about 90% become fresh litter is equal to low nutritive value, and as it decomposes, it increases the nutritive value. So how does this happen? Well, the decomposition of these leaves occur through leaching of the soluble components found inside the leaves, such as amino acids, which is a source of nitrogen for bacteria, and sugars that gets leached out of the leaves also, which is a source of carbon for the microbes. And also through microbial oxidation of cellulose and lignin found inside leaves and barks of trees. All right, how does this work? Well, you have a crab eating a leaf, right? Because some crabs eat leaves. They eat the leaves, and then they pass it through it, and as it comes out in pellet form, there's two pellet form, microbes colonize their pellets. All right, and it breaks down that material even more, and it adds those nutrients to the system. Okay, so all this all this production is necessary for the growth of juvenile species that lives and thrives inside the mangrove ecosystem. So that's one of the reason why it's so diverse in species. Okay. Any questions on mangroves? Did you review that in class already? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. All right, so the next system is the seagrass. Okay, well, like mangroves, seagrass is a flowering plant. All right, it requires sunlight and it produces energy through photosynthesis, which means it exists in shallow waters only. All right, and it's a main source for sea turtles and manatees. It's a nursery for juvenile species and grazing fish that feeds in these areas, forage in these areas. They feed on the algae and diatoms and bacteria and other invertebrates that are found inside seagrass. Other than that, it's a perfect carbon sequestration. It does perfect carbon sequestration, which means it increases the oxygen level inside the water column, which is important for the survival of these species. It also filters this entire system, improving the water quality and the visibility of that area. Okay, and like I mentioned, it's a nursery ground for juvenile fish. So coral reefs and seagrass beds reduce the water tidal flows, which prevents less stress on the mangroves, which exist behind these other ecosystems. All right, so the adult fishes of coral reefs utilize the mangroves and seagrasses mainly as nursery grounds, as seen in this picture. Okay, so we look at if you look at the top, it says grouper life cycle. Right. So what happens is out in the pelagic area, Miss Tanya and other marine biologists, they go out and they monitor these spawn and aggregation sites. So the fish they gather in that specific site and they spawn, they release their eggs and their sperm inside the water column, and the fertilization occurs externally. All right, and then the ocean current brings in, when it hatches, the ocean current brings in these larvae and they settle in seagrass or they settle in the mangroves, as you can see here. Then eventually they use all these nutrients like I just talked about, all right, and they grow into subadult fish and then eventually migrate back out to the coral reef and eventually to the pelagic again, and the cycle continues. So maintaining these two ecosystems, the seagrass beds and mangroves, are very important or essential for the survival of many species, right? Other than groupers, you have like I believe lobsters. Their juveniles go inside the seagrass beds, and then the largest grazer in the Atlantic Ocean also depends on the mangrove system, and that is the rainbow parrotfish. I believe it grows to about 3.5 feet in length. All right. So, and then not only that, but adult fish that are foraging, they traverse between these three ecosystems because they know that they might find easy prey like larvae and juvenile fish inside seagrass beds or near mangroves. So they go towards that area and they might get lucky and catch a few. But ultimately, these systems are somewhat designed to protect juveniles. All right. Any questions so far? Guess I'll take that as a no. Okay. So if we look at this slide, all right, maybe I should ask somebody, is there anyone brave enough to explain this slide? It's very simple. It has two schematic diagrams, one with mangroves present and one with mangroves absent. Anybody?
What do you guys see based on this image? All right, good. Go ahead, Shanti.
Okay, sir. So viewing at the top image that has the mangrove present, I would say that there is like a habitat for the fishes to be safer than where the ones that there is no mangrove. So in this part, we're seeing in the first image, we are having more. Eventually, we're having more fishes. Being protected due to the mangroves present, and then in the absent part, we just see that there is a fewer amount that reach to the adulthood.
All right, so thank you very much. All right, so that's basically it. So when you have a healthy mangrove system, you have a nursery area for these juvenile fish, and then in turn, it influences species richness. All right, like Ms. Tanya mentioned. All right, and also species diversity. You could see different types of species in this picture. Okay, versus the mangroves absent at the bottom. So there are less fish. There's a lower survival rate, as you can see. There are a small number of juveniles in that area, and I'm sure the grouper here is enjoying them as a meal. So it's good. It's important for us to maintain these systems because of these important ecological processes. All right. So in addition to the ecological importance, the coastal system offers other crucial ecological services. All right. So other than like the picture here shows at the top, other than being a home for these animals where they forage and they nurse and all that, it offers other services. For example, if you look to your right by the pine trees, it looks like pine trees. You know, that depicts land. All right. So sediments gets washed down from that area when it's rainy season, especially in Belize, and it comes and it settles in estuaries or mangroves. And in this area, you get a good area for nutrient cycling and the exportation of other organic material. All right, from that system back out to the seagrass and the coral reef. All right, and other than that, it acts as storm buffering. Okay, it's a habitat for migratory species. Here at Audubon, we monitor migration of birds from North and South America, and some of them actually settle in the mangroves when they come from North America. They come here during the wintering season, and so they use the mangroves as a habitat. Some goes inland and further south, but the mangroves are important for that reason. For example, out at Harpoon Key, every year the guys, they monitor these migrating birds, and they use Harpoon Key as a resting stop. So sometimes they stand on the beach and they could see the birds falling. Some of them falling because they're literally they're tired, so tired from traveling that long distance. Now imagine you don't have that area protected, or you have that habitat for them to survive. All right, so you would have they will eventually die out. Okay, and on the other side of the seagrass is important. For binding sediments, like I mentioned, it recycles nutrients. All right, and it also exports organic matter that it produces from that system. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so and Belize's coral reefs and mangroves line coasts, like you can see in this picture, and it provides critical protection against erosion also and wave-induced damages from tropical storm. So the Barrier Reef provides the first line of protection for the Belize coastline and other countries in this region, as you all know. All right, the prop roots of red mangroves provide the second line of defense for the keys and the coastline and from erosion. Okay. Other than that, there are some, there are some economic and social benefits of all these three systems. Okay, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with these. Anybody could explain these pictures to me? Someone other than Miss, what's her name, that just answered?
How about I pick people?
All right, good, thank you.
Let's go ahead with Oziel. Can you please explain the image?
3 images, what do you get from them?
Let's have Oziel and Linnell. Oziel first.
About the images.
Yeah, you could start from the right.
Okay. Okay, from the right, I can see that there are a person that dived and went on finding this. What are those in the middle picture? Those are crabs?
No, you mean inside the icebox?
Yes, sir.
That's conch.
Conch, okay. So conch can we find more on deeper levels of the ocean?
Yeah, the system supports conch species like the queen conch, right? But we also harvest them for economic benefit, right? Fishermen depends on these species for their survival.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure a few of you might know a fisherman or someone that depends on the reef. Go ahead, Nisarka.
Now I was gonna say, Shanti and Herman, thank you for volunteering. I just wanna listen from other people, okay? And then we'll get back to you guys. Because I'm pretty sure you guys have a clear idea as to what exactly is being spoken about here. And I see Joanna here on this side. I'm guessing you meant conch season. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, miss.
All right. So yeah. Linnell, are you there?
Yes, miss.
Can you please explain?
So we're talking about the economic and social benefits of the conchs, right? I would say fishermen depend on the seasons, like the fishing seasons for conchs, for them to be able to sell it to others.
Okay. Let's go with Vieri. Sorry. Okay. We have Ashby Aisha as well. Yes, Vieri, go ahead. What are you seeing here? Social and economic benefits of this?
Of those three ecosystems. Go ahead. Good.
Okay. Or no. All right. So Ashby and Aisha, quickly.
Yes,
Okay. Aisha first and then Ashby. Go ahead.
okay, so I would say that when it comes to the economic benefits, I think that it provides some type of money within like the government and with taxes and with all of that. I think from the places that they sell it to, for example, the ceviche places, they get the money and it's locally being shared within like the country, so it helps a lot.
So it helps with livelihood. Wonderful.
Ashby?
Miss, going to what Aisha said, the fishermen when they fish for like these specific stuff in their like specific seasons, they have to pay the government or like the market, and then they get money for themselves too. So it would be like a 50-50 on the economic, and then for the social benefits, like as seen on the third picture, it's like recreational activities that can be done because of like the beautiful parts of the reef.
Okay,
good. I love that answer. Thank you.
And Sherry on the side, she mentioned that the environment is good for tourism. And yes, it is, right? Based on how beautiful the ocean is and just the water itself. That's open water then. Shanti and Herman, did you have anything to add on to that?
Well, yeah, just on the left hand side, the picture with the fisherman and park ranger, I guess from Half Moon Key. When it comes to they are socializing with the fishermen, maybe telling them what they can do and what they do not need, like advising them, then like not taking out conchs or lobster out of season and stuff like that, so that they can reproduce. Maybe enlightening them, no, giving them knowledge on how the ecosystem operates and stuff like that, so we can have a sustainable ecosystem, you know. And same thing to the right hand side, they use they are it's good like for tourism. Then the ecosystem, once we have a good ecosystem, like we'll have more tourists coming in, you know, giving more benefits, more income to society, you know, to the country and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you all very much. So you obviously understand the importance of these ecosystems, right? So like he mentioned, the picture to the left, you see the park ranger and you see our community liaisons manager. He's the one with the eyeglasses. So what happens is this is an initiative we have started here at Audubon. It's called Boat to Boat, where you visit the fishermen's boat and you talk to them about their issues they might be going through, or marine science area or marine biologists might collect data and then give report on species, all right? And then we go back and we talk to them about that so they understand what's happening, okay? So they might understand, they might have questions like, why are they closing the season so early? And then we could go out and we could tell them, you know, this is what we're finding, all right? So that's the role of a marine biologist. You collect your data, you interpret that, and then you present it to the people. In this case, present it to the fishermen or present it to the government and say, this is what is happening, so this is what we think needs to be done or get done so we could have a better sustainable harvesting, all right? So it's important for our fishermen to understand that, because the misconception might be that, you know, they just want to close season or they're being stingy with the protected areas, when the reality is protected areas are designed to maintain diversity and a healthy population, all right? So there's something called the spillover effect. So if you could imagine a small piece of land, all right, and you protect that area and then you have species reproducing inside that area, what will happen when you have too much? The population grows. Eventually, they move out of that area and they go inside the harvesting zone. You understand? So it's important and it's critical to have these areas protected, and it's equally important to have the fishermen understand that. All right, so they respect it, and they will, their future generations could live off of it as well. All right, and the picture to the right is of course tourism. They're snorkeling. They're having fun and they're enjoying the scenic beauty of our marine areas. All right. So like Ms. Tanya mentioned, imagine in a few years, this disease, this tony coral tissue loss disease just starts spreading and killing off these tony corals. All right. It won't be as vibrant, as colorful, and people will eventually stop coming, because why would I pay 100 US or something to go out and see dead corals? All right, so we all have an important role in protecting these areas and keeping them healthy. All right, and I hope everyone understands that.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
I've heard that the conch fishery is the second most important commercial fishery of Belize. How true is that?
Well, okay, one second. Let me ask Mr. Tannen. So he's saying that he heard that sorry, what's your name again?
That
what is your name?
Is the second most Oziel Mendes.
Okay. Okay, so Ms. Tanya is beside me. I'm using her computer, so I'm asking her. All right, she can't hear. So he's asking, he's saying that he heard that the conch industry is the second most important fishery. Yes, she said, yes, that is true. Okay.
Okay.
So it's important for us to continue monitoring this species, all right, for harvesting. Good question. Anybody else? Nope. All right. So on this slide, we'll talk about some threats. We'll go through it fast because we're out of time. All right. This is the last slide, I believe. Okay. There are some threats that affect our coastal ecosystems, whether it is natural, like these diseases, or anthropogenic, meaning human caused. All right. The first one talks about land use change. Okay. So like it simply means deforestation. You start to cut down all these mangroves just to develop or build a hotel. All right, what happens? You won't have a nourishing ground, or you won't have that primary production of nutrients for the other system, right? Also, changing rainfalls and drainage patterns if you cut down these forests. Removal of riverbank vegetation, it means increasing erosion, all right, and increased sediment loads in rivers. All right. And if you fill up wetlands, it also has the same effect. Okay. So the other one talks about unsustainable coastal development. Like I said, clearing mangroves just to build a hotel, filling wetlands. All right. Building coastal reinforcement that change coastal currents and erosion patterns. You know, you might impact turtle nesting beaches. Out at Half Moon, it's a turtle nesting area. Every year, turtles come in and they nest. Okay, so imagine someone decides, or the government decides to sell Half Moon Key, all right, to some rich man, and they just decide to build a big resort. Okay, they might affect the beach, and then the turtles won't come and nest anymore. All right, it also impacts migratory birds. And then there's climate change, increasing sea surface temperatures, sea level, acidification, and intense storms. All these might lead to, in fact, they lead to intense storms, okay, which might cause other like erosions and the trees being damaged. All right, and then there is pollution, right? Chemical runoff, industrial waste, like we see up north in the New River, okay? So that's due to nutrients being run off from farms. Okay, that's the finding. That's what they found. Okay, there was too much nutrient inside the river, so then you have that algal bloom. Okay, which blocks sunlight, and then eventually bacteria started to grow, and then the other organisms they were starved of oxygen. The water became anoxic. That means lack of oxygen, and they all died out. So imagine that happened in these coastal ecosystems also. If that runoff just continued and eventually leach into the mangrove system, you will have that same adverse effect and eventually go out to the coral reef system. Then there is unsustainable fishing, illegal fishing, right? Using illegal instruments like the gill net, like Ms. Tanya talked about. Fishing out of season, okay? Like I said, it's important for fishermen to understand why you have a closed season, all right? It simply means that when the season is closed, these species are given enough time to reproduce, okay? If you don't have a closed season, people just are fishing how they want, when they want. And eventually you won't have that reproduction, all right? So then you will have a decline in population, and that's not good. Over time, you will have extinction, all right, which is a fact. So you need that closed season so any species can reproduce, all right? And we talked about fishing gear, fishing without a license. There are zonation in our fishing waters. You know, people are licensed for a specific zone as to be as sustainable as possible. Okay, and then you have natural ones like invasive species like lionfish, or this black tiger prawn, which is a shrimp. Okay, so species like lionfish might eat juveniles, right? So these are all threats to our coastal ecosystems. Like I mentioned, whether it be natural, these diseases, and there's only so much we can do as researchers, but we do our best, nonetheless. All right, and we try to reverse the effects of climate change by being more eco-friendly. That's as much as we can do as citizens. Okay, or we could educate people about it, why it is important to do certain things or follow certain regulations. Okay, so in conclusion, so mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and coral reefs form highly complex ecosystems, and the connectivity between them has been shown to increase fish biomass. You have a nursery, all right? You have a spawning area out in the pelagic. They migrate to the nursery area, which is the seagrass and mangrove system, and then they migrate back to the coral reef where they live their adult life until it's time for spawning again. If they use that system to maintain their population. Okay, so like I mentioned, it is important to maintain all three, not only for that, but for the other ecosystem services they provide. It helps with reducing the wave impact when storms occur. Okay, and by doing that, Belize City might be saved or other coastal cities. But other than that, the nursery areas for these organisms are uninterrupted. If you have less waves coming in, you have a better population, a better species diversity. All right. So coral reefs are important to buffer that wave system, that wave action to protect the mangroves behind. Okay. Well, that wraps it up for me. And if anybody have any questions, please feel free to ask. Or our marine biologist is still beside me, so you can ask her any question, and I'll be sure to relay that. Yes? No? Miss Silva?
Any questions, guys? Okay, Shanti, go ahead.
Okay, Miss Sir, whosoever can answer me this question. It's based on the coral reefs. The brain coral, the finger coral, and the massive coral. Which of those three has a greater abundance in either the patch reef or the back reef in the half monkey area?
Okay, 1 second.
Hi, sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Okay, Miss. So I was talking about the coral reef, the three main ones, which are the brain coral, finger coral, and the massive coral. Sorry, I want to know which of those trees has a higher abundance in either the back reef or the patch reef in the area of the half monkey.
It's the brain, the finger, and which one?
The massive coral, Miss.
Patch reef and back reef near half moon. So I would say the massive, that would be more abundant in the patches, and the brain is more abundant in the back reef.
Okay, Miss. Thank you.
And then you could find the finger coral in both areas, but they're not very abundant.
Okay, Miss. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Anyone, guys? No questions? Confirm or deny, please.
Not any that comes to mind, Miss.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you then. All right, so I guess that is it for today. It's almost 3 o'clock. And I would like to thank Mr. Roberto and Ms. Tanya for giving us this lovely presentation. I know we had technical difficulties, but we still pulled through. Thank you so much for all of the information, and thank you guys as well for being present.
Thank you so much for inviting us to share information again this year. We're always willing to help out where we can. Thank you for the attention as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and thank you to. I hope you figure out your field trips, because it's important for you to see or practice this in person. All right. So I hope you figure that out. Thank you again.
Yeah, we definitely need to work something out for that, because we missed the trips as well. Hopefully in the future, in the near future.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roberto and Ms. Tanya.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye, guys. Okay. Thank you. Bye. I think, Elvis, you want to stay behind to talk?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Please.
Go ahead. Right now.